Welcome to the Joy and Goal Setting Podcast, where we empower individuals to discover their purpose, achieve their goals, and experience a joyful life through encouraging conversation. I'm your host, Hudson Dodds. Today, we're sitting down with Sean Coughlin, an entrepreneur, a surfer, and colleague. We are going to discuss how short-term goals lead to short-term success. But to experience lasting joy, these goals must align with the person we want to become after they are achieved. Sean, welcome to the podcast. I'm so pumped you're here.
Stoked to be here.
Awesome. So I'd love to hear where you're from, where you went to school, and a hobby that you're into.
Sure. I grew up in Gloucester, Virginia. It's a farming and fishing town in Tidewater. Tidewater is a regional term, kind of like low country, so southeastern Virginia.
Nice.
I went to Harvard College for undergrad, University of Virginia for law school, moved to New York, practiced law for a brief, unspectacular period. Started a few companies, started to invest in some companies, and I get to work alongside you sometimes.
It's been a pleasure. It's
Yeah.
been fun.
Yeah.
Learned a lot.
Yeah, me too.
Do you have any hobbies that you care to, tell us about?
I'm an avid surfer, sort of a wannabe skater. I broke my foot skateboarding, doing something pretty cool.
What were you doing?
It was trying to do a 180 ollie off of a ledge, which is like
Downtown?
an appropriate activity for like a 19-year-old, not a 39-year-old.
Yeah.
But
you felt good doing it.
I felt like I was gaining the respect of the teenagers, and then I broke my foot.
And then you lost it quickly.
I don't know. I think it's like, you pay to play.
There you go. Okay.
Yeah.
So you put it in, you got some scars, some stripes.
Yeah, I went to a skateboard competition under the bridge at the bridge spot in downtown Charleston.
This was during competition.
No.
Oh,
This was this weekend.
Oh, nice.
And I saw a bunch of my buddies who I
Okay.
skate with, and they were like, "What happened to you?" So it's just kind of like,
It's part of it.
yeah, it's like you're participating in the community by getting injured.
I get that. So you mentioned that you had I forget how you put it, but basically not amazing law time. So tell me about that story. So how did you get into law? Why did you choose to go to law school?
Sure.
Why did you choose to be an attorney? And then what made it lackluster?
Yeah. I grew up in this small town. My parents, very artistic. I grew up in the country. They both went to college and dropped out. And so we were very like blue collar growing up, lower middle class, in a very working class town. But my parents instilled in me this idea that like, all you have to do is make A's. If you make A's, you can do whatever you want. And they knew that I could. And so they expected it. And so I just think I was on that track for a long time. Like, what's the best college I can get into? What's the best law school I can get into? What's the best job after law school that I can get? It was very like a U.S. News and World Report ranking based.
I'll get A's so that I can go to college, so
Yeah.
that I can go to law school, so that I can
Yeah.
do well, or that's just, don't even know. Like, that's just what I do.
Yeah,
Let's
so
go
I can
there.
like buy a vacation house and drive a Mercedes and
All those things.
whatever,
Yeah.
right? Which are all good things, but like I think I had a very immature like decision-making framework previous to being like 29 years old.
Yeah.
Probably a decade ago. And I was making decisions out of that framework almost without realizing that that was sort of my my approach.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so law school, you became an attorney in New York. And how long did you practice law?
I practiced law for about a year.
So just a year.
Mm-hmm.
At what point did you realize this isn't for me?
Probably about 4 months in.
So do you remember, was there like a moment that you can look back on and be like, I remember in this place or this restaurant or whatever, and I was like, this is not for me? Or was it just like around 4 months, you're like, what was there a time, and if so, why? Like, what was it?
Yeah, I think that during that 4th month, I billed 100 hours one week, which means that I was at work for more than 100 hours. And I remember waking up at about 6:30 a.m. on a Saturday morning and having the mid-level associate who I reported to, like having missed like 6 calls from him because I wasn't like on the way to the office. And I just remember looking around at like even the partners who sort of had made it and thinking, this is a great life for them, perhaps, but it's not for me. And I don't want to be like any of these people.
So you did it for 4 months, and then you realized this lifestyle, from what I'm hearing, is like, for you, it doesn't match up with the person that you want to be, what you value in life. You stuck around for, obviously, till the end of the year. And during the following months, is that when you realize, like, what did you do? Did you do a kind of a deep dive, like, what do I want to do next, or did you just kind of stick it out and then just quit cold turkey? Like, what did you do in those the following months?
I remember going to like the occasional get together, like if I had the ability to kind of sneak out at 7:30 on a Friday night and go to a party, and people would ask me how work was going, and I would just sort of say terrible, like the cocktail party conversation,
miserable.
Yeah, which sort of takes people aback,
Yeah,
right?
because they're used to saying, "Oh, it's good, it's fine."
It's sort of like the
obligatory
veneer, the facade. And like I got to a point where for a while I was just sort of scraping the bottom, and I just left one day. I told the people I was working with, and one of the partners who had kind of recruited me, fantastic attorney, great person, called me. She said, let's take a beat, and I said no thanks, and that was it. And I don't think that like I had this sort of emotional maturity at the time. I think I was 25 to articulate like why I'd made the decision. I don't think that I necessarily made the decision in the way that I would if I could go back and do it again, but I think it was very much the right decision for me.
And so you quit. Did you have something lined up at that point? No, you just quit in New York. And did you stayed in New York?
Stayed in New York.
After you quit, was there any moment where you kind of like reflected on how you got to where you were and where you're going, or did you just kind of keep going until you got a job and then that helped shape who you are?
No, it just got weird after that for a while. So I sort of still had that sense of like, well, what is a normal path, right? And so I talked to friends who had gone into consulting, into banking, and sort of started to tiptoe down those roads. I thought maybe the problem is that it's, I like to work hard. Like it's not the hours, maybe it's not even the culture, it's just the kind of work. So I started to tiptoe down those paths. I had a nice chunk of money saved up, but it's New York City and it was 25. And so that disappeared pretty quickly. And so I needed to get a job. So I did all sorts I tutored. I bartended. I don't know, this is not a flattering story, but I had a lot of friends who worked, some in Charleston actually, but some elsewhere, like in the food and beverage industry. So I just put their restaurants down on my resume.
Nice.
Yeah. And I sort of like winked my way into a few like bartending jobs. Tutored, bartended, did some other odd things, and just sort of made my way. And I pretty quickly decided what I wanted to do was start something. And it might have been like a big overcorrection. When you do something that's very extreme, you're like, I have like 3 bosses and they're all really mean to me.
Opposite. I'll be my own boss. I'll do whatever I want, my own time.
Yeah, that's right. So I kicked around a few ideas, started a few things that were very short-lived, and then started a technology company for faith communities that grew from like 2 guys around a kitchen table like this to serving like millions of users every month. Sold part of that company, and that company still exists today. I'm still on the board. Moved away from the day-to-day recently, but that's a whole decade-long journey.
Well, I want to get to that in a minute, but I want to go all the way backwards. And I mean, you're familiar with the framework, of course, and I'm curious to know if you could be a magical genie and kind of see what life would have been like. Had you, in high school, still made A's and still wanted to go to college, whatever, all those things, if you were able to align where you went to college and then even grad school with the values you talked about that you saw, I don't want this, they don't align with my values, but if you had an opportunity to outline what those values were, how do you think that would have changed your decision? What might you have gone to school to do instead? And
That's an interesting hypothetical. I guess the first thing I'd say is I'm really grateful for my story. Like I think that like God had a plan in all of it. Like the universe conspired on my behalf despite my best efforts. Because I feel like by sort of gunning, that's the word we use in law school, like you're a gunner, like, and I was kind of like a undercover gunner, like kind of like cool on the outside, but like really like, I'm going to get the best grade, like
Right.
I'm going to win this. Right. I'm still like going out on the weekends and doing my thing, but I think by going so hard in that direction, it was very clarifying for me. So like, I don't have like illusions or delusions about like what that life is, which I think after, and for me, that wasn't the right path, but after I sort of realized that, I was able to kind of get on with my life. So that's sort of the first way I'd answer your question is I'm grateful for what I did, even if I had a more sort of mature decision-making framework.
yeah,
I think that the first thing that comes to mind is I probably would have like traveled around the world surfing, like actually,
yeah,
like I probably would have like gone and like worked on a boat or something, like I had a lot of adventure as a young person. Even moving to New York City is an adventure. I traveled a ton when I was young, but I think I would have like taken it slower. I think I was like a young man in a hurry.
yeah, yeah.
And I think I would have slowed down, like way down. And I have 3 sons now.
I was gonna say, so let's talk about that. Then. So slow. How do you feel like that's been incorporated? What you just mentioned, like slowing it down, like adventure. Like how do you see that playing out into like your life role, maybe as a father and husband?
Yeah.
Like what does that look like, and does it show up? And if it doesn't, like how could it? And do you want it to?
Yeah. Well, I think moving to Charleston was a big part of that. I didn't move to Charleston. You don't move to Charleston to surf.
No,
The waves are
you certainly don't.
okay. Good sometimes, like non-existent sometimes. Okay,
Most of the time.
mediocre most of the time. But a big part of the reason we moved to Charleston was that I wanted the outdoors to be a bigger part of my life, and that has definitely come true. And I just think by being able to balance things like travel and work and family, I've been able to pursue some of that adventure in my 30s. I'm almost done with my 30s, but in my 30s, even in some ways more than I did when I was in my 20s. And so that's something I'd hope to pass along to them. When I was 23, 24, I felt like I was in like a competition, but now at 39, I realized like I was so young, and like there was so much even more like adventure to be had. I'm grateful for what I have gotten to do. But I think that's what I would tell that version of myself. It was like, there's this spear fisher woman. She's a free diver in Hawaii, and she's world class. And she says, when everything in your life is telling you to speed up, everything around you, you're whatever, 50 feet under the water, and it's all like you're panicking. She said, what you're supposed to do then is slow down. And like I think that's something, but it takes life to learn that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and it sounds like your boys have an incredible opportunity to learn that from you and see that, right? And see what adventure looks like while slowing down. Sometimes, like you said, adventure can feel like things speed up. Whether you're looking forward to the adventure or during the adventure, you're constantly thinking of all the things going on versus like being present and slowing down and actually enjoying it. And value-wise, it sounds like adventure. What is your mantra?
My mantra is abiding and action.
Abiding and action. Is adventure any of your values?
I mean, it's in there, definitely in the statements that come from the 7 roles.
Okay.
It's in there a couple times.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
It better be.
Yeah.
It seems like a big part of who you are.
Yeah, and I think the cool thing is like, I've been married now for 8 years, just celebrated 8 years a couple days ago.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And then raising these three boys, like being very like local most of the time. I do get to go on some trips, but like there's a lot of adventure in that,
Oh, a ton of
like a
adventure.
lot of risk and a lot of like, it's a deep well. I mean, like being like a committed dad and showing up for your family, like that's to me like the kind of radical thing in
Yeah.
some ways, right? Like
Yeah.
that's the harder thing than just like being a vagabond,
Yeah.
Like, so I
Totally.
try to remember that.
Yeah. So we've touched a little bit on, who you were without kind of a framework, if you will, a decision framework, I think you used. And obviously working with us, you've utilized our framework. And I'm kind of curious to hear how that shaped you. What's been the biggest impact for you? What have you seen how has it impacted your life roles and who you are as a person?
I think one of the really cool things about our framework is that it's like whole person, identifying these 7 roles. I mean, it's not perfect and it's not necessarily done, but it does a really good job of kind of like feeling like it represents all of your lived experience, And I think that's really valuable. We were talking the other day about like, which of the 7 roles are you afraid of tackling, which was really interesting for me and got into sort of things about my family history and my grandmother. And it's like, there's a lot there, but I think that having a framework where I can almost start to, I'm like a top-down thinker, but start to sort of almost inventory like myself and my life and my, the various communities that I participate in and vocation and those sorts of things. Like that's a real gift, it's really cool.
Yeah. So you have this really interesting journey in your career. I'm curious now, do you have any goals as it pertains to work? If so, would you be willing to share what those are and kind of what you're doing to work towards those?
Yeah, I have a kind of a mixed relationship with goal setting, which is a funny thing to admit as such a believer in so much of what we do, I think it ties back to my story. I think because I was so motivated to like get out of this tiny town, like I remember just being a little boy and just being like, I know how to get out of here. It's going to take a while, I'm going to go to New York and like take over or whatever, which I didn't do. But I had a lot of goals and I was like good at like setting them and achieving them.
Yeah.
Like, what do you do? I set goals and achieve them,
Right. Right.
like, and so I think that I feel almost like a reticence, like a bit of a, part of me wants to say, I want to be of service. I want to be useful. I want to be present. These very like sort of values, that are not about like putting some, target out there and then going toward it. But I think one of the things that the framework has helped me with is to maybe set better goals and goals that are like more in line with
aligned. So maybe achieving them is not bad, but actually is aligning with who you want to be.
Or serves the whole person.
Yeah.
Yeah, serves not just a very narrow view of success. Mm-hmm. I mean, maybe a somewhat traditional view of success. Like I still maintain that, right? Mm-hmm. But also incorporates, what does it mean to be a great dad? What does it mean to be a great friend? Mm-hmm. What does it mean to be a part of a community and to be of service? Yeah. And so, I think in terms of specific professional goals, like I know I'd love to like build something again, but I'm like something new, but I'm really enjoying helping to build this new thing and a couple other things, investing in a few things. I love like early stage, I love like that 0 to 1, I've always had that sense of like, well, why this should exist. Let's go make it exist.
Right.
You know? And so sometimes when Mark and I get to talking, or when you and I get to talking, or some other folks on the team, those conversations around like, yeah, it would be great if this existed. And like, that's what we're moving towards, in fits and starts and through a lot of struggle and challenge.
That's right.
Yeah.
It's like the excitement there's excitement that we know, right, to pursue a goal and then to pursue a product, which is a goal at the end of the day, right? The production of something, the creation of something. And then to go and then begin to see it like in action is really, really powerful. It's really cool.
Yeah.
And as humans, the same thing. Like I think when we set goals that seem, as we talk about in our framework, dream goals, so we maybe can achieve, but probably not. And then we start seeing the daily movement towards those goals. Mm-hmm. It's the same kind of feeling where it's like, oh, I can. It's not much.
Yeah.
Towards the dream goal, but it's something, and it's like kind of pen to paper, and then it becomes something, and then all of a sudden, a year later, you're like, holy cow, I just did that one thing, and now all of a sudden, I've achieved these big things, which align with who I want to be.
Right. Or you see, observe, or hear about like a breakthrough moment between a coach and an individual, and like you see that little fire. Mm-hmm. Like that's what gets me excited. You're like, oh, the magic. There it is. Uh-huh. And I feel like that's so much of what being like an entrepreneur is like looking for that magic, looking for that new thing.
Yeah.
Where'd it come from?
Yeah.
You're like, oh, like that's still like, it's not any less hard or necessarily harder, so to speak, than being a contract attorney or, a financial services attorney or, a school teacher or any of these other like noble professions. Right. But it's just, I think, the one that I like and that I feel more sort of called toward.
Yeah. When you started the faith-based app, mm-hmm. what was the impetus for, one, being in the faith space mm-hmm. versus anything else? Mm-hmm. Two, like, why tech? You went from attorney to tech. I don't feel like there's always overlap, but maybe.
Not really.
Not often.
No.
Yeah, why, like... How those two paths?
Yeah, my mom for many years was the secretary at our church. So I just always remember it both as like a place of community, a place of potential transformation, but also like a small and medium-sized organization that like had like real needs. And I remember hearing about those needs growing up. And so there's this famous technology investor called Mark Andreessen, and his idea is like software eats the world. And now he's saying things like AI eats the world. It's this idea that like where software hasn't like led to some kind of transformational change, it will eventually. And so I just thought, there's a lot of opportunity for technology to be a force for good in this space. And it's a space that I care about a lot. And it's a space where it's been under-innovated. Right, under-resourced. That was really true back then. It's still true to a certain extent. But it's something I could wake up in the morning and like sort of just get behind. And that was a real gift to myself. Like, I remember being an attorney and the other attorney saying, our deals are on the front page of the New York Times or Wall Street Journal. And like that like seemed like it should be motivating to me.
It didn't get you going.
But I didn't care.
Yeah.
Whereas like being able to help, a church that, was, walk down the street in Manhattan or in Charleston, and you see it, right? Whether it's an old traditional building or it meets in a storefront or a school or whatever it is, to think like, oh, our software helped them raise 25% more this year than they did last year. And I know about those families and those people that really impacts. That really did it for me. And I think that comes back to my background. Like I'm like a rural working class guy, not anymore, but like that's where I came from, and that's where I have a friend who says like start something that pulls on your heartstrings. If you want to build something, like, start there.
Yeah,
like don't start with something because you thought it was a good idea,
right?
Because like it's gonna get really hard.
Well, law school was a good idea.
Yeah,
it didn't work out.
I don't
right?
know
The
if
same
it was a good
thing.
idea or
Well,
not. I liked it.
Right, it seemed like a good idea.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
To get you to Mercedes and your vacation home, right?
I have a 2001 Toyota Tundra out there. It's pretty sweet.
It's pretty awesome. How's the AC doing?
Yeah, it's hanging in there. Yeah, it's not too hot today.
No, today's lovely.
Yeah,
it's quite lovely. So pulls in your heartstrings. So you're working with us, which is awesome. I'm very grateful for it. you want to build something new. And I think being an entrepreneur, you have a bit of that space with us, but I know there's always a sense of like on your own, right? So is there anything that you've been tinkering on, thinking about that you can share? Or maybe just even like the dreams of like, God, if there was this, and would it be in the tech space still or somewhere different? And what heartstrings would you move to next?
I don't know. I think is the short answer. I think that I could share some things that I know I feel really passionate about. I don't know what that would look like in terms of application around a product. But I think that's probably what I'd be willing to share at this juncture.
Yeah.
I feel really passionately about being a dad. And I have a great dad, and he not perfect but great. And he is now a great granddad, and he passed along a lot of fantastic things to me. And I think sharing those things like with my sons and being like a very I don't know, just like a hands-on, fully engaged dad is really, really important to me. And I think relatedly, I have a real sort of passion around, in the church context, we call it men's ministry. But I guess what I would call is just like guys being friends,
Yeah.
Which like every week there's an article or study, some research that comes out about like how like grown men don't have friends and just like all of the bad outcomes that leads to. And so I don't know what that would translate into, but those are two things that I'm just really like passionate, like pull on my heartstrings hard. I have a lot of other interests, but those are two areas that I think really, and I think just for me, sort of philosophically, like in a place like Charleston, a lot of businesses are built around like serving. Candidly, like upper middle class to wealthy people, like I fit in that demographic today, like, and that makes sense. Like those are good businesses, right? I don't think I'm ever going to start that business. Like I'm going to start a business that's like more democratic, small d. Right.
right.
Yeah.
So
like
right.
More for the people.
Yeah.
That's just, I just know that's what I get
Excited about.
jazzed about. Right. Yeah.
So you mentioned being a great dad, wanting to be a great dad, being present. Yeah. Obviously, I wouldn't say it's part of your DNA, but it's very it's value oriented who you are as a human, and so I'm sure you find time for that. But I'm curious, is there anything that you do that helps keep it intentional? That you do that might, a listener might say, "Oh, that's good. I'm gonna utilize that in my life." Or is it just something that you've been doing it for so long that it's just who you are?
Yeah, I've only been doing it for 5 years, and I don't think I am great at it. I think I'm really naturally gifted at certain parts, but like the parts around like patience and gentleness, like not my forte. But I'm trying to get better. I think it comes back to that community piece, like getting together with a group of people, co-ed or a group of guys, and just like sharing your life with them on some kind of regular, intentional basis.
Yeah.
Sometimes that just looks like, hey, me and this friend get together every month and have coffee, and just like really sort of like, move past the pleasantries.
And you feel like that helps with like both accountability and just like obviously being open and vulnerable is helpful, but knowing when I'm meeting with so and so. Not that it always plays into it, but just kind of like a reminder of like, probably gonna ask me about if I've been patient this month. Like, is that helpful? Yeah. I mean, in our framework, we talk about like a coach. Obviously, not a coach, but friends and mentors can essentially be like a coach in that way.
Yeah, I mean, I have one sort of dedicated mentor who like serves that role, and then I have a lot of friendships and relationships where they might be more sort of on the same level, so to speak, or they might be more like a guy who's 10 years previous to me, who's going through those rites of passage as a 25-year-old, who's evaluating, is this the person I'm supposed to marry? Those sorts of things. And for that guy, those things feel like the biggest problems in the world. And for me, it's easy to discount them. But the things I'm going through, a mentor who's maybe 70
feels the same way.
Can look at that and be like, oh, that's no big deal.
Right.
Right. And those are really healthy dynamics to have.
Yeah.
But I think that I feel very grateful to have them because I feel like I think putting those kinds of like guardrails up in your life and having those kinds of coaches and sort of mentors and that kind of like encouragement it's not, I feel like in our culture, it might be like embraced as like a nice to have, but I think it's more like a must have.
Yeah, it's part of it. It's how we're made, right? To be communal, to be relational.
Yeah.
So, curious, do you those relationships and mainly relationships? Do your kids know you have them? Mm-hmm. And if so, what does that look like? Because I'd imagine, like you said, being a father and being a good father, you want to pass down, obviously, that like having friends is important. So how do you let your children know that's important to you, and what does that look like?
Yeah, I mean, I think part of it is like sort of letting them grow up around those people, and kind of like letting them be influenced by those people, and just like spending real physical time, everyone together when possible. But another part of it is like, okay, we're driving to the beach and a buddy of mine calls. And so I'm not going to talk to my kids for 15 minutes. I'm going to talk to my friend about whatever he needs to talk about, And I'm sure a lot of it goes over my kid's head and I might have to like edit some of it. So I'm like not talking about whatever adult thing this guy's talking about in front of my, 5 and 3 and 1-year-old. But usually to the beach, it's just the 5 and 3-year-old. But anyway, I think just they're like, who was that? I'm like, it was my buddy, and that's...
So bringing them into the relationship instead of like, they won't understand, it's not important. Yeah. Keeping them separate. Yeah.
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 Man, but it's a hard thing to be a good dad, That's a hard thing. Yeah.
So you mentioned coaching. So you took on T-ball this year.
Yeah.
Tell me about that. How was that experience?
Coached T-ball, Mount Pleasant League this year. The last game, I had to be kind of the adult on the field.
Kind of?
Yeah. Well, I was getting kind of worked up. So I'll tell you a story. The other team's coach, I guess he decided that like, because the next year some of his players were going to be in coach pitch, he was just going to start throwing the ball. Oh. And like, I was on board with that. I was like, okay, man, fine. But like, it would just take some of them 15 pitches to hit the ball. You're a baseball guy. And it's also like when they do hit it, it comes way faster because there's the kinetic
science,
energy of the
science,
ball.
Right?
Like, and so our parents were getting so upset with this other coach. And so I was just like, guys, we got to not do this right now. Like, I don't know who's right, but like there are a lot of kids here and like, It's not about us. So these kids are 4 through 6. So that was interesting. But overall, great experience. Yeah, I mean, my dad was my T-ball coach and it just felt like a fun thing to do. And that age is just funny.
It is funny.
Like baseball is too much game for a 4-year-old.
I don't disagree. Yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot. But you mentioned that like the spark, the fire, that when a kid or an adult or whatever you're coaching, but a kid in this instance, like kind of gets it for the first time.
Yeah.
As the coach, it's like super empowering, right?
Yeah.
To be able to see them become, I hate to say like, oh, a kid hitting the ball is like becoming the person they want to be. But in some ways it is because they want to be good. They want to progress. They want to learn.
Yep.
And to see them get that is powerful from the coaching standpoint, just as much as it is from the recipient, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's like, it's cool to be able to be on both sides of the, achieving or pursuing goals of like the coach is just as exciting to like pursue the goal with someone. I mean, I think as a parent, it's kind of similar. And the tricky part as a parent is not to not let the goal become your goal, right? But let it be their goal. Let them seek after it. Let them go after it. Let them try and achieve it and fail or not. But I found that with my kids, like I tell them all the time, I can't want it more than you. Like this is your desire or not, but it's not mine.
Right.
If your goal is X, I can't want it more than you. And that I think has helped in some ways. I mean, I grew up a little different, but I grew up with this goal set mentality, but really just for sports. And I mean, I remember growing up in this world where I think it meant just as much to my mom as it did to me,
Yeah.
potentially. And it helped drive me for sure. And I will be grateful forever for it. But I really do, I want it to be theirs, you know? And it became mine, all those things, it's all good. But yeah, I want it to be theirs. And like you said, as a father, you want them to grow up with learning how to set goals that are good, and goals that align with who they should be, who they want to be. You were obviously really good at setting and achieving goals. And now you admitted it's a little bit of a funky, if I go down that road again, what might happen kind of thing. Not really, but you know what I mean?
Yeah.
How's that shaped with your children? How you talk about goals or how you talk about achieving things? What does that look like?
Yeah. It's been funny just to see, like, they all come, like, kind of with some wiring that you didn't do anything to wire. Like, they all come out with, like, just these particular preferences and these particular interests, you know? And I think part of it is just sort of, like, celebrating those things, you know? But I also think there's a part in which you can sort of say, all right, you know, like, I know that there's an outcome that you want, and I can sort of play the role of dad or coach and sort of say, like, you know, be an encouragement and be a bit of a, like, have a bit of a, give them a push, you know? I think that's hard for me to know where that balance is, though, you know, between, like, being like the sort of the baseball dad or like the stage dad or whatever it is, right? And like just giving them enough of like that kind of support and courage.
Yeah.
Because when they...
Giving the resources, giving them the tools, helping them while not pushing in a way that is too much.
And I think it's specific to the child too.
Yeah.
You know, like I have one son who he just needs to be reined in. Like he's 100 miles an hour. He's like a force, right? And I have another who's like the most gifted like artist. Like you could just see it. The things he creates, I'm just like, I couldn't do that now, you know? But sometimes I feel like he's super talented in a certain area, but at the same time is a little bit afraid of failure. And so how do you kind of guide him?
Yeah, how do you talk about that?
To that point of like, hey, just try.
Just try, it's okay.
Yeah, you know, and if you fail, it's awesome.
Yeah.
Like, but we're going to learn together, you know? And that's a open question to me.
No, it's true. It's as we talk all the time about failure and about growing from failure and growth mindset, and teaching that is difficult because even as humans, I mean, as adults, as parents, we're still learning for ourselves, like how to take in a growth mindset in all facets. You talked about the framework being whole person. I think in certain life roles, it's easier to know how to accept failure and grow from it. In other life roles, it's much more challenging. And I think it can be challenging as a parent. I think it's challenging to accept failure, right? And then do it publicly to your kids. Like, sorry, X, Y, and Z, I shouldn't have done that, you know, whatever. Yeah. That's tough. That's tough. But it's the best way to learn.
Yeah, people say progress, not perfection. My mom's really good at that. You know, she's like, I'm a work in progress. Yeah, I'm sorry, y'all. Like, I got too mad about that thing. You know, I was like, all right. And I think when I can lean into that with my kids is helpful.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. So what other projects are you working on outside of the company? You know, fun projects that are piquing your interest or that you're enjoying tremendously?
I'm trying to land a 180 off of a ledge. Without
unsuccessfully somewhere. Next time. You'll learn from that.
Yeah, I'm working with another company who's doing something really cool in the at the intersection of helping busy families and extremely high quality, extremely clean meats and vegetables. So that's a really neat thing that I'm working on right now. I started to invest in early stage companies through a couple of friends, like funds, which I'm really something I've wanted to do for a long time. I went to my wife. I was like, I want to do this. She's like, what? Is that? You know, like, what's kind of what I've been doing for like 10 years.
Right.
Right. But but I've been doing that. I was talking to Mark, actually. We have kind of parallel church involvement right now. The senior warden at the cathedral downtown, and we're doing a big capital campaign, and I have 3 more months left in my term, and I'm
excited for that?
I'm ready to called the spirit of rotation. I'm ready to rotate.
To tag them out.
But but it's I love the leadership. I love what we're doing, and I think it kind of that's one of the things to me that like keeps me busy, but also keeps me like out of myself. You know, I feel like kind of to this idea of like what's animating your decisions. I feel like I was very much bought into this idea, up to the age of, I don't know, mid to late 20s of like, oh, like, well, what are my goals? Like, what do I want? Very like self-directed, which like, depending on what values you bring to the table can be good or bad or mixed usually. But I think that this one thing I try to do is kind of put a lot of service in my life. Because otherwise, like, I think it gets too self-centered and too like self-directed, too self-reliant.
Yeah.
So.
When it sounds like the service side, the faith side that you just mentioned, in some ways it's like a safeguard from.
Yeah.
It's your deliberate practice in a way.
Yeah.
Of making sure you don't go down the rabbit hole.
Yeah.
If you will. Where you end up going down these paths that aren't directed towards who you want to be.
Yep.
And the values you have.
Yep.
And that's the community side too. That keeps you accountable and all those things.
Yep. You mentioned the last book you read. It's very on theme to our whole conversation. The last.
Yeah. What is the last book you read?
Well, I'm about halfway through it. It's called Raising Emotionally Strong Boys. My wife gave it to me because she thought I could use some help.
In raising you.
And raising them, I think. I don't know. I'm not clear. But there's this idea of creating like a space outside for them to like release their physical energy. So we're going to get a kick pad. It's like in kickboxing where there's like a
nice
pad where you can kick it and punch it and things.
Get some energy out.
Yeah. Just go outside, man.
Beat the crap out of this thing.
Yeah.
And then feel good.
I think I will.
Absolutely. Well, thanks so much. It's been a joy talking with you, Sean.
Yeah, man. I'm grateful for the opportunity.